Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Lens on Real Estate. Welcome to the studio today. It is Monday, February 27th, and we're still in Black History Month. We got one more day, but we are still in Black History Month. So before we get started with the show and our guests, because we have an excellent guest for you today, and before we get our guests introduced, let's talk a little bit about one person on this last day of, or at least the day before the last day of Black History Month. And on this day, a lady by the name of Charlotte E. Ray was an American lawyer. She was the first Black American female lawyer in the United States. Ray graduated from Howard University School of Law in 1872. She was also the first female admitted to the District of Columbia Bar and the first woman admitted to practice before the Supreme Court of the District of Columbia. Her admission was used as a precedent by women in other states who sought admission to the bar. So let's just give honor and congratulations and recognize and remember Charlotte E. Ray. And she was born January 13th, 1850, and she died January 4th, 1911. Kudos to Charlotte Ray. As I said, we've got a great guest lined up here today, and that guest, his name is Terry Talbert. And so we're going to go ahead and introduce Terry, bring Terry on into the studio. Terry Talbert, come on in. Well, Julius, I thought you were going to add him. Okay, let's get this other one out. Hello, Mr. Talbert. Terry Talbert is the executive director of the Economic Opportunity Authority, Savannah, Chatham County area. And Mr. Talbot has been the executive director there for well over 12 months now, but it's a lot with Mr. Talbot. He's been at the Economic Opportunity for quite some time. And Terry, if you remember when I worked there, I once worked at the EOA. And Terry, can you believe that was 1982? 40 years plus years ago.
I do remember.
1981 is when I started there as a tutor counselor, and I worked there well a little over a year, but it was a very rewarding experience because as the tutor counselor, as I recall, I assisted young people in applying or at least getting their GED. These people had dropped out of school for whatever reason, but they wanted to get their GED, and that's what my job as a tutor counselor was. We tutored them in various educational aspects to get them prepared to take that GED, and I enjoyed it. Very rewarding job. So, as I said, Terry is currently the executive director. But before we get into talking about the agency, and of course, Terry sharing with us his background and how he became the executive director of the EOA, we must talk about the man himself who served as the EOA executive director for 45 years, maybe more or less, but for 45 years. And that person is Mr. John Finney. And we're going to allow Terry, though, because Terry was more or less his right hand man a good portion of that time. So, other than Mr. Finney's family, what better person to talk to us about Mr. Finney before we get started and talking about what we want to talk about today with the current executive director. Derek, tell us about Mr. John Finney.
Well, John was around before I came on as a staff member. He was educated at Savannah State and worked there for a while, and then went off to Atlanta University, and then came back to become the executive director. At that time, I actually was on the board as a teenager, and Charles McMillan, preceded him as the chief executive officer, and we had to take a vote on the board to determine who was going to succeed Charles. Charles had gotten a position in Reagan's administration, not Reagan's, but another president's administration to work with the Office of Minority Business Enterprise. And so it was between John Finney and another deputy director, and the board chose John Finney to lead the agency, at least on a temporary basis. And after about a couple of years, Charles McMillan did not come back. He was running the Office of Minority Business Enterprise under Richard Nixon.
Okay.
And then John became the CEO. At that time, he was in office across from Forsyth Park on Park Avenue. Then we ran into some financial challenges with Ronald Reagan when he became office and wanted to close the office down. And so we got together and decided to purchase the building on Anderson Street from the Board of Education. So he was instrumental in making certain that became a part of the community. And part of his emphasis was on college school because he was a Beach High alumni. And Beach High School, prior to going to on Hopkins Street, it was the first Beach High School. And of course, he took it under his wings and enjoyed that. He brought a lot of programs to the agency during his tenure. We moved Head Start on campus. We built a brand new building. We also had a paper recycling plant, the first one in the city. We worked with a for-profit partner, and eventually we sold it, got out of the paper recycling program. He also, during his tenure, created a program that you were in for high school dropouts to help them get their GED, a community gardening project, and of course brought in a lot of well-known people from around the world, including the Black First Miss America. He brought in Miss Jameson, who was the first female astronaut, brought her to the city of Savannah. He brought in a Black judge that was on TV. So John did a lot in the community, and he worked very diligently to work with other agencies in the community. So during his tenure, he brought a lot of activity to the agency, but he also allowed staff, including myself, to do some very creative things in the community.
And did you mention, or did I miss that, Mr. Finney was also instrumental with the MLK observance coming or in Savannah, getting started in Savannah, along with Reverend Benny Mitchell. Is that correct?
No, actually, it was before Benny Mitchell. He actually started the first Martin Luther King celebration at EOA, brought in people from across the community, from all races and nationalities to recognize Martin Luther King, even before it became a national state holiday.
Yes.
He also worked with the sickle cell anemia program. That was the first program that was in Savannah, coming out of our office to help African Americans who suffered with that debilitating disease with the blood. And so John Finney actually started at working with Memorial Health, and eventually ended up at Memorial Health.
Wow. Because I recall Savannah was definitely one of the very first to observe MLK Day, even before Atlanta really got into it. Savannah was observing the MLK Day. So thanks to Mr. Finney for having that foresight and thought to get that started here.
Well, he was the very first. When the city of Savannah got into some challenges with the Black community after a young Black man was killed, they brought in a new chief of police, Galloway. And so Galloway and I went to Atlanta to celebrate Martin Luther King birthday. So he was always first in trying to get things going and to bring people together in the community. That was what John was about.
So you and he worked together about how many years?
Many years. You could say I was the boss in the earlier days because I was on the board at 16 and 17 years of age, and we of course voted as a board to make him the permanent CEO of the agency.
Fabulous, fabulous. So now, Mr. Talbot, well, and I'm going to say Terry because that's what I'm comfortable with. I've known you for many years, so we're talking to Terry Talbot audience, and we've spoken about the legendary John Finney. who was the executive director of the Economic Opportunity Authority for 45 years. Now we're going to move on and talk a little bit about the current executive director, and that's Terry. And Terry, you moved into that position. How did it feel? You stepping in to not to say his shoes, because I would say probably no one can fill those shoes, but you stepped into this job of this person that you worked beside for many years. But I do understand just prior to you, there was one other. How many directors of the EOA were there?
There were actually 5 executive directors of the agency, including John Finney. And of course,
Okay.
John Finney stayed the longest beyond.
Mhm.
It was, Charles McMillan and 3 other people before him. And of
Okay.
course, they had another executive director just before myself.
Okay. And then you stepped into the role. That had to be very, very rewarding for you. Tell us how, the moment you were named and you knew you were the permanent executive director of the EOA. Tell us about that moment.
Well, there wasn't any excitement in my blood, to be honest with you. I was already preparing for many years to take on the reins of running the corporation many years ago. And of course, John allowed me to get right training. And if you know community action agencies, there's 1,000 of us around the country. And we have a network of agencies, both in rural and urban areas, including Guam and Puerto Rico. And
Mm.
so I did an internship in Washington, D.C. with our lobbyists for almost 6 or 7 months that John allowed me to do that. So throughout my career, there was a great deal of training. Plus, I enrolled in the first public administration program at Savannah State to train several of our peers, including the now county manager, Michael Kegler, his wife, who's at the Board of Education, Gina Taylor, and several other people. And at that time, we were realizing that there was going to be some changes that were going to be happening in the community. And Savannah State made certain that they created a cadre of people to be prepared to take on leadership roles in this community as African Americans.
Okay. Now, as far as the job you held prior to you becoming the executive director, because you held that position for a while, and that was deputy director of housing and economic development. And part of the reason why, we certainly wanted to have you on the Lens on Real Estate program or in our studio. But tell me about that position and what were your responsibilities as the deputy director of housing and economic development?
Well, I mean, there was of a wide variety of things, but including housing. Housing was just one piece of it. But my task was to, as we did some studies in the community, housing became a big problem for poor people in our city, and especially homeless people. So I concentrated on bringing some housing activities, including working with the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And for about 12, 13 years, I served as the national president of the National Federation of Housing Councils, training people all over the country on preparing homeowners throughout the country for becoming homeowner buyers, specifically minorities. It was interesting is right now today, the same percentage of people who own houses is the same percentage of people in the late 80s who own houses. Now the numbers changed. I certainly work with Fannie and Freddie Mac. We even created a situation in Washington with a legislator who helped us create a rule that if you got an FHA mortgage, that they can't foreclose on you unless you were 3 months behind. But to go back to the home ownership piece, back in the late 80s, African Americans owned less than 40% of their houses. Guess what the number is today? Around 40 to 42%. The numbers did increase prior to the financial debacle that happened in the late 90s. They were up at least 55%. And There's a lot of homes that were foreclosed on during that period of time. And so now we're back at the place where the home ownership rate for minorities is around 43%, for people who are uh, white, 75%, and of course, people with Hispanic backgrounds are at 48%.
Mhm.
Now, if you know, the FHA just recently reduced the mortgage insurance rate from 85% to 33%, so that homebuyers can, of course, not have to pay so much for the mortgage insurance premium.
Mm.
And so
Okay.
that takes effect on March 1st of this year.
Okay. So then the housing aspect, that's one of the services that the EOA offers. And let's just review the services that the agency does offer other than housing, because that's our main issue today. But what are the other services that the agency offers to the community?
Well, I would like to call it, we have a one-stop shop. Of course, one of our oldest programs is our Head Start program.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Yes.
around when we opened the doors in 1965. It's called, we have Early Head Start and Head Start. We started at the ages of 6 years of age and go all the way up. And we serve, this year we can serve up to 600 children. We're actually changing that. We're going to reduce the number of kids that we will be serving down to 425. And That's one of our largest programs. We provide quality childcare. All of our teachers have to be certified at least in early childhood development or get a CDA. And Right now, we're actually taking applications for children to come into the program. And like many places, including the Board of Education, we've had a very difficult time hiring people. As we speak today, we're below, we have 20 positions that are open, and beginning March 1st, we're increasing the salary and wages for the teachers that we have up to $21, $22 per hour.
Are
Uh,
those listed
we
on your website
pay
now?
for uh, free dental, free vision, and we pay 80% of healthcare. That's one
Okay.
of our programs. Several other programs we have, including some housing programs. We have the Tom Austin House that we developed several years ago. Rick Brown, who is the manager of that project, we provide housing for formerly homeless families with children. We provide
Mm-hmm.
12 apartments for those. In addition, he also managed another apartment for us, the Pula House, which is 4 homes for veterans who have been homeless, but they're permanent housing. We have another facility for individuals, men primarily. It's called SRO. It used to be called a Ducky Street SRO. We were in partnership with a profit partner. We bought him out. It's on Ducky Street. One part of the project was burned out. It's almost finished, and we'll be housing 50 individuals in a three individuals to an apartment, and that should be sometime in the next couple of months.
Yeah, that SRO did interest me because it did say uh, it's a it's a temporary housing for men. And how long do they get to stay?
This is not temporary. It's actually
It is.
permanent. It's never been
Oh, is it
temporary.
permanent?
One of
Okay.
the one of the reasons we started it, because we never believed that having people stay in just for a short period of time and be out on the street.
Mm-hmm.
When we opened it up, it was actually designed as permanent housing.
Okay.
So we have one tenant that's been there as long as we've been in the facility. And they get to stay as long as they continue to pay their rent and don't get into
Mm-hmm.
trouble. We did lose 20 units uh, about 3 years ago to a fire, and we're about to complete that process soon. And we're reducing it down to 3 individuals per unit, and it'll be 15 total people that will be on site.
So the Duffy Street facility, how many does it hold?
Right now, holds 20, and adding another 15 will be 35.
Wow, that's permanent
And,
housing.
and behind that facility, we also have a large lot that is our plan to develop affordable housing for families.
Okay. Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that because I see where, yeah, the EOA purchased the Duffy Street facility. And so that kind of, okay, so you're into real estate somewhat.
We've been
Um,
in real estate for a while.
yeah.
Even the facility for veterans that's on 64th Street, that's ours. There's no debt on it.
Hmm.
The Duffy Street SRO has a small debt, and so and then we have the Austin House, which is on Martin Luther King. There's no debt on that as well. Plus,
Okay.
we own all of the real estate on at 618 West Anderson Street.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Outstanding. Now, the home buyer education program. Okay, so we talked about your Head Start. You talked about the housing, and there's a program called what is it specifically for veterans? Is there something specifically for veterans that you all
That's
do
a housing,
within the housing?
permanent
Okay,
housing for veterans.
okay,
There are 4 2-bedroom units. It's a quadruplex that we own, and it's 75% filled, but we will be filling the other one up. It was full and one person moved out. It's in a cul-de-sac
mm,
in Midtown Savannah. It's a very nice facility, and the persons who live there pay their own utilities, their rent,
hmm,
and they do get counseling from the VA.
okay. Now, what about this grandparent retired and senior volunteer program? What's that about?
Well, RSVP, Retired Seniors and Volunteer Program, and
Hmm.
the Foster Grandparent Program are 2 different programs. The Foster
Okay.
Grandparent Program is designed for low-income seniors. They're given a stipend to work in Head Start, other daycare facilities, and at one point they were working in the public school system
Okay.
until COVID happened. They also volunteer in different other location hospitals. They're given a stipend, and our oldest volunteer is 94 years old.
Wow.
But
Now
he's a World
that's
War II veteran.
outstanding. Outstanding. Now, Terry, I think it's time for us to do a commercial.
Okay.
So we're going to take a brief break for that commercial to step on in here. Okay, audience, we're going to continue our talk with the Executive Director of the Economic Opportunity Authority, also known as the EOA, and that is Terry Talbert. And when we left for commercial, Terry was telling us about the Grandparent Retired and Senior Volunteer Program. And let's talk a little bit about the Representative Payee Program. Is that kind of a money management type program?
Yeah. When I think Bill Clinton was president, he changed how we do business in public with the welfare office. It required people who were on public assistance to, after so many months, to find work. And of course, there are 2 things that happened with us. We started a program working with mothers who were on um, welfare, but more importantly, they asked the Department of Family and Children Services asked us to manage um, funds for people who were receiving Social Security, SSI, and veterans money.
Mm-hmm.
And what we were finding out when we started this program, we said, listen, we don't mind helping those 3 or 4 families. And in Then it became 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, 10 and 11 and 12 and 13. And what the program does is it provides financial literacy and money management for people who have a problem with managing their money, or that the courts have said that the families can't manage their money. When we started the program, we had many of the people who were on Social Security and SSI and some veterans who had people who were actually taking advantage of their money, not necessarily their family, but businesses. We had vendors and business owners who would loan people money and would take their whole check. And so when we started it, part of our responsibility was to ensure that we paid the basic needs of the individual first. And so when we started it, many of the small store owners, which were primarily non-Black, who were taking advantage of many very poor families and individuals in the community. So they would call us up and say, well, Terry, so and so owe us some money. But what you going to do about it? And I said, nothing. I said, you're in a high risk business, and so you just lost your money. And because we had to pay a light, gas, and water bill with the funds and make certain that they had food to eat. And so what transpired was many of those vendors started dropping off, and very rarely do we get any of those individuals or those companies taking advantage of those individuals who were losing their Social Security and SSI money to vendors. In addition, we were working with individuals in the community who had expertise in providing housing for some of our clients. And we've had to take people out some of the houses that they were living in. But the challenge has been always that there's not enough available affordable housing, especially for individuals who are on SSI. And SSI is not based on money that they earn, but based on their needs. And right now it's roughly around $900 a month. It's very difficult to find housing for anybody with that kind of money.
I mentioned one of the questions I had was about collaboration. So I would imagine. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. One of the questions I had was talking about collaborations and the EOA. What are some of the major collaborations? I'm sure the city of Savannah, you talked about affordable housing. So what are some of the other collaborations?
Collaborations change from time to time, but we do have a collaboration with the health department with Head Start. We have a collaboration with some of the banks, including SunTrust, Truist Bank, and Wells Fargo. We have relationships with those. We have relationships with many of the hospitals, both Memorial and St. Joseph Hospital. We have relationships. We do have a relationship with the City of Savannah and Chatham County government. As on the list, there is a great number of them. We have a relationship with Savannah State College, with Armstrong State College, Georgia Southern, and some of the other educational institutions. And of course, we have relationships with many attorneys in the community, as well as real estate companies who come in and help teach some of our home buyer education classes.
Oh, great. And we're going to get into that one. I see there are 3 federal agencies, again, self-funding from a variety of sources, but 3 of them were listed: the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, U.S. Department of Agriculture, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So these 3 federal agencies, how does that funding happen?
Well, let me just say this. Most of our funding for our agency is from the federal government.
Okay.
Some of which go through the state of Georgia, but in terms of funding locally, I would say less than 1/2 or 1% of our money comes from local governments. Now, the only exception would have been the Chatham County government, when COVID was going on, gave the agency $2 million to help families who were experiencing evictions. And we helped roughly 689 families in Chatham County. And we were able to dispense that probably within less than a year.
Okay.
But most of our money, the $18 million that we had last year, comes from the federal government or the state government. HHS funds the Head Start program. It also funds Community Services Block Grant, which goes to the governor's office and comes to us. And that money is used for a variety of programs, including our housing counseling program, our workforce development program, to help us manage the representative payee program, to develop our board, and some other programs. We do help with some rent, some utility assistance. We get roughly about $1.5 million to $2 million through the state, from the federal government, and Health and Human Services to help pay with utility bills. We get very little funds from the local government in terms of helping people in this community. We also receive money from USDA for our Head Start program to help with paying for the food that we feed the children with. And just recently, we had the Secretary of Agriculture to visit us, which was the first, and actually he made our agency a farm.
That was
so
that.
We receive money from USDA to do some stuff. We do have through our foster grandparent program and retired senior volunteer program. We do have a garden outside to help seniors grow food that they can use and take home.
Wow, I did see that during my research for talking with you. I saw where the Cabinet Secretary of Agriculture was indeed here at the Anderson. Was it the Anderson Street site, or did
he was at the Anderson Street? That was a partnership also with International Paper. Gulfstream also provided funds to us. And both of those, including Home Depot, helped provide funding. We did have Step Up to come by and some other volunteers to come in to help out on that day. And the seniors were out, and the secretary stayed with us probably for an hour. The mayor came in and welcomed the Secretary of Agriculture here, as well as Savannah State College and their students. What the secretary said to the students from Savannah State was that he wanted them to apply because 60% of his workforce is leaving because they've been there long enough. And he encouraged them to apply to the Department of Agriculture for work.
Wow. 60% of his workforce is eligible to retire. Is that what he was saying?
Well, and that's not just there. Even with Health and Human Services with Head Start, they all are down with employees, and many of them have been there many years, and they are leaving. And so there's shortages everywhere. As I said earlier with Head Start, we all are having the same issues. There is the unemployment rate in Chatham County is less than 3%, but the unemployment rate in the Black community is much higher.
But we can, we'll talk about it, have them direct people to the EOA website. These jobs that you currently have, they are on your website. How do they apply?
They can apply on the website or they can come in, but the only jobs we have is with our Head Start program. Our other programs are fully employed.
Okay. Now, the EOA Board of Directors, you do have a Board of Directors. How is that? What's the makeup of your Board of Directors, and what are the terms? Do they have term limits?
Well, let me just say, let me go back. When Lyndon Johnson created the Office of Economic Opportunity in 1965, and one of his primary missions was to ensure that poor people had a voice in things that occurred to them. And one of the things that happened when he became the president, he said this one thing I always remember. He said, "What good is power if you can't use it?" And if anybody know a little bit about Lyndon, he was also a school teacher. And the only two races of people in the community in which he worked at the time was whites and Hispanics or Mexicans. So when he became president, one of his biggest jobs and one of the biggest things he wanted to do was reduce poverty in America. And
Mm-hmm.
so one of the requirements for the money that came to all these agencies around the country was that you had to include poor people on the board. Uh, a funny thing happened on the way to opening up was that poor people started believing all of this and created challenges for many communities around the country. And so it was changed that now that local governments and the private sector, along with the poor, would have to be on the board. So a third of our board members are selected from organizations in communities where there's a large percentage of poor people in their communities. So we
Mm-hmm.
only have 15 board members. One third of the board comes from local government. And when we first started, they came from both just the city and the county, but they can come from Pooler, Port Worth, or Bloomingdale, unincorporated county. And then the other third comes from entities like International Paper, Gulfstream, churches, and fraternities and sororities. And so
Okay.
right now our board is comprised of 15 board members, and their term is 5 years. They
Mm-hmm.
can certainly serve more term than that if they choose to do so, but right now that's what the board is made up of. If they
Okay.
come from low income citizens, they have to be voted on by the people in those neighborhoods to recommend them. The board of directors make a decision whether or not that person sits on the board or
Okay.
not. When they sit on the board, they have to sign off on a conflict of interest, making certain that there's no conflict between them and making decisions for this corporation.
Okay. Now, is the EOA unique to Savannah, or how expansive is the EO Economic Opportunity Authority?
There are actually 1,000 agencies like ours around the country,
Okay.
and our national group is called the National Community Action Partnership. We also have um, a, uh, a legal arm called the National Cap Law, which is in Chicago. We also have Head Start Association, which is more than 1,000 around the country. We have a state
Mm-hmm.
association and a regional association. I have served on the regional association and as chairperson of the state association. There are 20 agencies like ours around the state of Georgia.
Okay. Absolutely. Um, well, we're going to get into the crux of uh, you being on Lens on Real Estate today. Sure, talking about the EOA, it's a fantastic agency and offering a variety of services that are certainly needed in the community. And one of those services, which we touched on, is the housing services. And a part of that, you do home buyer education. So tell us about that.
Well, that started many years ago when we became a HUD-approved counseling agency.
Hmm.
I approached John about it. He said, okay. And um, what we do is that we provide education to potential homeowners, specifically the process of purchasing a home, getting your credit straight. And we bring in many people who are experts in the field, uh, from credit, from bankers, from real estate professionals, insurance agencies, and of course the city of Savannah, state of Georgia. The city of Savannah provides down payment assistance as well as the state of Georgia. Um,
Hmm.
Sometimes they do get funding from the city, sometimes they get it from FHA, but what we try to do is educate people on uh, the home buying process. Now, we don't tell them that they should or should not buy it, but we do tell them, give them advice on what they need to know about purchasing a home. And we also give them information on predatory lending, making sure
Hmm.
that they understand what that is. Because there have been many people that we work with over the years who've had predatory loans.
Hmm.
We explain to them about financial literacy, everything from purchasing a car to credit cards, and other things that are barriers to them becoming homeowners. But we do encourage them, and the one program that we do know that provides uh, help with is FHA mortgages. And again, I said earlier that FHA reduced the mortgage insurance rate down from 0.85% to 0.55%, so that it gives a better opportunity for those 45% of people who are renters to purchase a home,
Mhm.
and for you who are real estate professionals to help them get it. Uh, and so that's what we do now. Like I said, we have been involved in training people across the country about becoming homeowners and trainers, working with Fannie and Freddie, and on helping people become homeowners. And
Okay.
again, we don't make a decision on those. Those are decisions made by the bankers. And of course, you as a professional will guide them in terms of trying to find the best house that they can purchase.
Okay, now we're going to move on further in terms of what it takes to go through that education program and get that certification. But we're going to go ahead and take a commercial break, and we'll be back to talk about that. Are we ready for the commercial? Okay, we're back, audience, back again with the Executive Director of the Economic Opportunity Authority, Terry Talbert. And Terry was going to finish off talking. We're talking about the housing uh, services of the EOA, and we got into conversation about getting the certification for, or at least once you participate in the educational portion, that certification. So, what does it take to get that certification, Terry?
Well, what we do is we provide information to the consumers, and what they do is they get a certificate once they complete it. The first
Mhm.
part of the class is about credit, getting your credit straight. And we have a person to come in and tell them about what they need to do to get their credit straight so that they can be prepared to purchase a home. Now, we do know that many people come into the class, they have no idea about what their credit is about. And so prior to them coming, we'll send them information and get their free annual credit report so they can have that available so that we can look at it. And then if there is two people in the household, we actually suggest that both parties come in because it's difficult for one person to go back and tell their spouse or their significant other what they just learned.
Mhm.
And so that third party that comes in and spends a great deal of time telling them about what they need to do to get their credit straight, to get their credit score up. What is a credit score? How significant that is? Why is it used? And of course, we fill that in and let them know that credit score is determining on what the interest rate is going to be for the loan that you're going to get because you have investors who invest in it like Fannie and Freddie. Once you take out a loan, then that loan is used by Fannie and Freddie in the secondary market. So
Mhm.
we spend a lot of time talking about that, and we do some stuff about telling them about maybe uh, devising a budget, looking at their uh, uh, how they spend their money, uh, what they eat for lunch sometimes, because maybe if they use some of those funds just to pay down the debt so that they can purchase a home. Now, we also spend a lot of time talking about the fact that in Savannah, and this comes in part of my being on the Tax Assessors Board that investors who own property don't get a reduced rate on their taxes as do a person who owns their primary residence. If you own your primary residence, the value of your property is frozen for the purpose of taxation.
Mhm.
Now, an investor who may have the same property as the next door person who owns their property, and the value goes up, then that investor has to raise the rent for that person that lives in that house.
Mhm.
The only exception is those people who live in subsidized housing. Once that class is completed, then the next class is the lender comes in and explains the process that you have to go through in order to get a loan from them, whether it's FHA, VA, or conventional. And they explain the variances between those three programs, including Farmers Home Administration.
Mhm.
The real estate agent comes in too as well and spend a great deal of time telling them about when you apply for a loan, when you fill out an application, and you submit your bid to a real estate professional, what that process is, what they need to do, and all those other things. And then finally, we do have an attorney and insurance industry person comes in and tell them about when you go to closing, what happens, and the insurance that you need to have once you purchase your home. And of course, our staff fills them in on what you need to do once you move into your home and things that you need to do in terms of applying for homestead and other things that are necessary to become a homeowner.
Okay. And again, I'm a realtor and affiliated with Scott Realty Professionals. And I know that the brokerage, Sabria Scott is the owner of that brokerage. And I know we've done that on occasion, come in and speak to the participants in terms of the home buying process. Very, very interesting. And just, again, a service that's needed and very rewarding to do. So, and that's kind of how we are going to be talking about the housing fair that's coming up, which other realtors as well as Scott Realty Professionals get to sponsor and participate in. So the housing fair is coming up April 1st, is it, of
I
this year?
think that's what it is. You know, I
Yeah,
haven't been in on that meeting.
yeah, Saturday, April 1st. And I know it's from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on that day. And if I recall, the one that we did, I think the last one was just before COVID because you didn't have any last year, but very well attended, very, very well attended. And the participants, it's open to the public, and the uh, the participants are very excited to attend. The doors, I recall, the doors opened at 9, and it was pretty much a full house at 9 o'clock. People eagerly look forward to the housing fair. How many years have you all been doing that?
Uh, God, we've been doing housing fairs for many years, so I
Mm,
would say at least 10. But the primary purpose of it is to get people excited, to bring all of the players in the industry together, include the city, state of Georgia, and of course, realtors
mhm,
to come in and open it up to give people options. Um, but we know that Saturday is a strange day for people because it's their day. But if they want to learn about becoming a homeowner, that's the place to come.
mhm,
Uh, and we have vendors who donate door prizes so that if you come into the program, you certainly can get a door prize. One of the things that we did have and still have is that a person who purchased a home in the program will give them $1,500. Once
mm,
they decide to buy that house, it's not $1,500 to them, but it is a certificate to Home Depot to buy things in their house. So we're encouraging them uh, uh, to do the best they can to find a way to purchase a home, and all the people that'll be there really are there to help you or help people who are interested in purchasing a home. If you're a young person, if you're 18 years of age and older, you've been working for at least 2 years, you qualify. Don't buy a car first. What you want to do is buy a house first. If you buy a car, what you'll learn is that if you buy um, a car, it may prevent you from getting that house that you need.
Hmm.
Lenders use what they call debt to income ratios. And of course, if you make $2,000 and as a gross income for the month, and you multiply that times 30%, you can determine how much money, that's $600 a month, that the monthly payment will be. So somebody will sit down and share that with you. Now you could buy a house, you could buy a car after you purchase your home, but the whole key is getting your house.
Getting the
That's
home.
what you want.
Getting the home. So that is definitely the key. Getting people interested in purchasing their own home. We understand people do have to rent. There's one thing going on now, just getting some affordable places to rent as well.
Well,
But
that's part of the things that we talk about. We tell them, listen, rents are going to continue to increase.
mhm,
The city of Savannah has just passed a thing to allow developers to pay a lot more money to build houses in the city, except for affordable housing. And
mm,
so, um, if you're living in a house and the rent is $1,000 a month, you can rest assured next year it's going to go up. That
mm.
same house, if you put your effort in it, you can purchase a home. And that's what the home buyer fair is about, to teach you about the possibility of purchasing a home. And it does take some effort on everybody in the household to make that happen.
Right, right. Is there a way, any activity or action going on to get the male more involved in taking that home buyer education program?
Well,
Because
we do get males to come in, and
mhm,
not as many as we would like to see, but
yeah,
they do come in.
yeah,
And when their significant others come in, we encourage them to have them come to the meetings, and some of them do.
yeah.
One young man that came in some years ago, not only did he purchase his house, but he found a way to purchase some apartments so he could make some money off of it. So part
Mhm,
of this is not just your own house, but also finding a way to invest your money into purchasing a home. And of course, realtors do more than just provide uh, information on you becoming a home yourself, but they also do help you with investing in other properties as well.
absolutely. Now, before we go, Terry, you mentioned that well, we didn't even mention it, but you brought it up. You are on the tax assessor board, but you are the chairperson of the Chatham County Tax Assessor. So you're certainly, a viable person to talk about that. And you did mention it. So tell us about your chairmanship with the Chatham County Tax Assessor's Office.
Yeah, I've been on the Chatham County Texas Assessors Board for several years,
Mm,
and it is a requirement by the state of Georgia. It is a legislative requirement that all counties have a tax assessors board, and their job through the staff, not ours. We just set policy, but to determine the value of all the real estate, both personal and real, in the county. The persons who sit on the board is five of us, and we determine the digest. The digest means to determine the value of all the real estate property and personal property in Chatham County, including airplanes, hotels, motels, whatever it is. Then it's sent up to the State Department of Revenue, and they approve the value of these properties. Now that's done so that the city, the counties, the Board of Education determine what your taxes is going to be. If you
mhm,
own your house in Chatham County, we're one of three counties that your property values are frozen for the purpose of taxation. It doesn't mean that your taxes doesn't go up. It just means that if you buy a house for $100,000, then you can never pay more than that. If your value goes up to $1 million, you're only going to be taxes on $100,000, not $1 million. And
is that the
so
homestead exemption?
that's homestead exemption, but you
Okay.
can only have one property anywhere in the whole country.
Hmm.
So you can own a piece of property in Texas, and if you've got homestead on exemption on that, you can't have it in Georgia.
Mm, okay.
So, but a lot of times what we found in working at EOA, because we also work with people with mortgage issues, that we found that there were people who for many years did not have homestead exemption, and they didn't know anything about it. And so when they come in, we'll look at to see if they have homestead exemption. And of course, the tax assessor's office have gone out and talked to communities about applying for homestead exemption. And I'll tell you what will happen is, like, if somebody builds $1 million piece of property next to yours, your property value is going to go up.
Mhm. Absolutely.
But if you got homestead exemption, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter because it's not going
Right.
to go up.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I do know in closings now, at least most that I've attended, been involved with, the closing attorney, that's one of the things they tell them to do. You know, you can, when you purchase at home, you need to go down and file for the homestead exemption. And
There are other exemptions that people can apply for, and they can go on site or call out at the office. There's a senior exemption, there's a veteran exemption, there's a disability exemption. So they can go online if they're not comfortable with going online. We made certain that we put all the forms online for people to file online. Now, the tax assessor's office has nothing to do with collecting taxes from anybody. We just set value.
Do just the VAT. I got you.
And the determination of what your taxes is going to be is determined by local governments and the Board of Education.
Well, Terry, it has been great talking with you, a wealth of information. I had more questions, but you know what? We're going to have you come back another time and talk about it, because it's been an hour. It doesn't seem like it, but it's been an hour. And we do want to remind people that the EOA, the Economic Opportunity Authority, is having that housing fair April 1st of this year. And it's from 9 o'clock to 1 o'clock, 9 o'clock a.m. to 1 o'clock at the Anderson Street facility. What's that address, Terry?
618, but it's to our newest building where the Head Start facility is. You come in on Anderson Street, and they'll come in, and you have to be present to win. If you leave, you do not get the big prize. And it is a big prize, and we won't tell you what it is. You got to come and get it.
Yeah, we got some big prizes. We definitely do. And we just want to mention Mona Clark, who is the person at your facility that kind of coordinates all of this.
Yes, she's the home buyer education coordinator.
Okay, great.
She's out this week, so that's why she's not here.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, Terry.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Okay. So everyone, our audience, thank you for joining us today, and come back, talk to us next week in the studio of Lens on Real Estate. Bye-bye.
I like that.